The knock came just before dawn, heavy and deliberate, the kind that makes your chest tighten before your mind can catch up. It echoed through the small, worn-out apartment like a warning from a past that refused to stay buried. Daniel Carter froze in place, his hand still wrapped around a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee, his heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned out the second knock. Outside that thin wooden door stood something, or someone, he had been unknowingly waiting for his entire life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that even the smallest good deed can come back in the most unexpected ways, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story might just change the way you see the world. Daniel Carter wasn't always this tired, this worn down by life. There was a time when his laughter filled rooms and his dreams stretched far beyond the gray walls that now surrounded him. But life has a way of reshaping people, of bending even the strongest spirits under the weight of loss and responsibility. 5 years ago, Daniel had buried his wife, Emily Carter, after a sudden illness that left him shattered and alone with their 3-year-old daughter, Lily Carter. Since that day, every breath he took felt like it carried the weight of 2 lives. His morning started before sunrise and ended long after the city fell asleep. He worked 2 jobs, one as a janitor in an office building downtown and another delivering groceries late into the night. His hands were always rough, his eyes always tired, but when he looked at Lily, none of it mattered. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he endured the endless exhaustion and the quiet loneliness that crept in when the world grew silent. Their apartment was small and barely enough, with peeling paint and a heater that worked only when it felt like it. But it was home. It was where Lily's laughter echoed, where bedtime stories turned into dreams, and where Daniel fought every single day to give his daughter a future brighter than his present. But even the strongest hearts have their breaking points. Bills had started piling up again. Rent was overdue for the 2nd month, and the landlord's patience was wearing thin. The school had sent a notice about unpaid fees, and Lily's shoes had worn out to the point where cardboard had become a temporary solution. Daniel had reached a point where hope felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. And then came the knock. Standing on the other side of the door was a man who seemed completely out of place in that crumbling hallway. Tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of power and wealth, the man carried an aura that commanded attention without saying a word. His name was Alexander Hayes, a name that dominated headlines, boardrooms, and industries. CEO of a global corporation, a man whose decisions could shape markets and change lives overnight. But what was someone like him doing here? Daniel opened the door cautiously, confusion etched across his face. The air between them felt heavy, charged with something unspoken. Alexander Hayes looked at him not with arrogance, but with a quiet intensity that made Daniel uneasy. He spoke slowly, each word landing with weight. It was time, he said, for Daniel Carter to repay what he owed. The words didn't make sense. Daniel's mind raced, searching for any memory, any connection to this powerful stranger. But there was nothing. He had never met this man before. He had never stepped into a world where people like Alexander Hayes existed. And yet, here he was, standing at his door, asking for repayment. The tension grew thicker as silence stretched between them. Daniel's first instinct was fear, fear of losing the little he had left, fear that somehow his already fragile life was about to fall apart completely. But Alexander didn't step inside. He didn't demand money or threaten consequences. Instead, he handed Daniel a simple envelope and told him to open it when he was ready to understand. And just like that, he left. The hallway fell silent again, but the air felt different now, as though something irreversible had been set in motion. Daniel closed the door slowly, his hands trembling as he stared at the envelope. It was plain, unmarked, but it felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than just paper. When he finally opened it, his world shifted. Inside was a photograph, old and slightly faded. It showed a much younger Daniel, sitting on a bench at a bus stop in the pouring rain. Beside him was a man, thin, disheveled, clearly struggling. Daniel remembered that day instantly. It had been over a decade ago, long before life had taken its darkest turns. He had been younger, barely making ends meet himself, but still holding on to a belief that kindness mattered. That day, he had noticed the man sitting beside him, soaked to the bone, shivering uncontrollably. Without thinking twice, Daniel had given him his jacket, bought him a warm meal, and handed him the last cash he had in his wallet. It hadn't seemed like a big deal at the time. Just a moment, a simple act of humanity. He never expected to see that man again. But now, staring at the photograph, realization hit him like a wave. The man in the picture was Alexander Hayes. The same powerful CEO who had just stood at his door. The envelope also contained a letter, handwritten with care. In it, Alexander explained everything. That day at the bus stop had been the lowest point of his life. He had lost everything, his job, his home, his sense of purpose. He had been invisible to the world, ignored and forgotten. But Daniel's small act of kindness had changed something inside him. It had reminded him that he still mattered, that he still had a chance to rebuild. And rebuild he did. Years of relentless effort, failures, and determination had led Alexander to where he was now. But he had never forgotten the man who had helped him when no one else would. Now, it was time to repay that debt. But not in the way Daniel expected. Days passed, and Daniel found himself caught in a whirlwind of change. Alexander didn't offer him money directly. Instead, he offered something far more valuable: opportunity. A stable job with fair pay, flexible hours, and benefits that ensured Lily would never go without again. He arranged for her education, ensuring she would have access to the kind of future Daniel had only dreamed of. But more than anything, Alexander gave Daniel something he had lost long ago: hope. At first, Daniel struggled to accept it. Pride, fear, and disbelief all battled within him. He had spent so long surviving on his own that the idea of someone helping him felt almost unreal. But slowly, as days turned into weeks, he began to see that this wasn't charity. This was the return of something he had given freely, without expecting anything in return. Life began to change in ways Daniel never thought possible. The constant stress that once weighed him down started to lift. Lily's laughter grew brighter, freer, untouched by the struggles that had once defined their lives. Their small apartment was replaced with a modest but comfortable home, one filled with warmth and possibility. And through it all, Daniel never forgot the lesson that had brought him here. Kindness is never wasted. Even the smallest act can ripple through time in ways we may never see. So before this story comes to an end, take a moment and write in the comments: have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Or has someone's kindness changed your life in a way you'll never forget? Because stories like this aren't just stories, they're reminders of the good that still exists in the world. Years later, Daniel would stand at another door, not as a man in need, but as someone who finally had the power to give back. And as he knocked, he realized something that made his heart feel full in a way he had never known before. The cycle of kindness had come full circle. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes, the smallest story can inspire the biggest change.